After 7 years of marriage, Sophia betrayed her loving husband Ethan when her first love returned. Heartbroken, Ethan quietly divorced her and disappeared without seeking revenge. Only after losing him did Sophia realize how deeply he had loved and sacrificed for her. She searched for him and begged for another chance, but when she finally found him, Ethan had moved on. Her greatest punishment became a lifetime of regret. Chapter 1. The perfect marriage. The rain drizzled softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment. Inside the warm kitchen, Ethan Carter stood in front of the stove, carefully stirring a pot of seafood soup. The aroma filled the room, mixing with the scent of freshly baked bread. He glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. Sophia was late again. A faint smile still rested on his handsome face. Probably another meeting, he murmured. For 7 years this had been his life, waiting. Not because he had to, because he wanted to, because he loved her deeply, completely, unconditionally. Ethan and Sophia had been married for 7 years. To outsiders, they were the definition of a perfect couple. Sophia Bennett was one of the youngest executive directors in the city. Beautiful, intelligent, elegant, and admired by everyone around her. Whenever she entered a room, people naturally turned their heads. Ethan was different, quiet, gentle, reliable. While Sophia chased success, Ethan stood behind her like an invisible pillar. Few people knew that many of Sophia's achievements were built upon Ethan's sacrifices. When Sophia wanted to pursue her MBA, Ethan worked 2 jobs. When Sophia wanted to launch a new division in her company, Ethan sold the apartment he had inherited from his parents. When Sophia spent nights working overtime, Ethan stayed awake waiting for her. Not once had he complained. Not once had he asked for anything in return. Because every time Sophia smiled at him, Ethan felt it was enough. At least that was what he believed. The front door finally opened. Ethan's eyes immediately lit up. Home. Sophia stepped inside. Her long black hair was slightly damp from the rain. She looked exhausted, but beautiful, always beautiful. Ethan quickly walked over and took her coat. "You haven't eaten, right?" Sophia nodded absent-mindedly. "I'm tired." "Come sit down. Dinner is ready." She gave a small hum. No thank you, no smile, nothing. Yet Ethan wasn't bothered. He had grown accustomed to it. He pulled out her chair, served her food, poured her favorite wine. Sophia scrolled through her phone while eating. A soft smile suddenly appeared on her face. The kind of smile Ethan hadn't seen directed at him in years. His hand froze. "Something good?" Sophia quickly locked her phone. "No," Ethan smiled. "That's good." But something uncomfortable settled inside his chest, only for a moment. Then he ignored it, because trust had become a habit. Later that night, Sophia fell asleep almost immediately. Ethan lay beside her, watching her. The moonlight illuminated her delicate features. 7 years of marriage. And somehow he still looked at her as if she were the most precious person in the world. His fingers gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Love you forever," he whispered. Sophia never heard him. She was already dreaming of someone else. What Ethan didn't know was that there had always been another man living inside Sophia's heart, a ghost from her past, a memory she never truly buried. His name was Lucas Hayes, her first love, her greatest regret, the man she once believed she would marry. 10 years earlier, Lucas had left the country without warning. Sophia had cried for months, waited for years. Eventually, life moved forward. Then Ethan appeared, patient, kind, dependable, the exact opposite of Lucas. When Ethan proposed, Sophia accepted. Not because she loved him more, but because she believed she could eventually forget Lucas. And for a while, she almost did. 3 days later, Sophia attended an industry gala. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom. Business executives filled the room. Sophia stood among them confidently. Then suddenly she froze. Her wine glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Across the room stood a familiar figure, tall, handsome, wearing a black tailored suit. His smile was exactly the same. 10 years had passed, yet she recognized him instantly. Lucas. For a moment the entire world disappeared. The conversations, the music, the crowd, everything faded. Only Lucas remained. Their eyes met, his lips curved upward. Sophia. Sound of her name coming from his mouth shattered every wall she had spent years building. And at that moment, without realizing it, the tragedy of her marriage quietly began. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone at home. He was decorating the dining table. Tomorrow was their 7th wedding anniversary. He had prepared everything weeks in advance: candles, flowers, a custom necklace, and a handwritten letter, a letter containing words he had never been brave enough to say aloud. He smiled softly as he placed the final rose on the table, completely unaware that while he was planning their future, his wife was staring at the man who would destroy it. Chapter 2. The return of the white moonlight. The grand ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the air while executives, investors, and entrepreneurs mingled with glasses of champagne in hand. Yet Sophia heard none of it. Her eyes remained fixed on the man standing across the room, Lucas Hayes, the name she had spent years burying deep inside her heart, the name she had forbidden herself from thinking about whenever she felt lonely, the name she believed time had erased. But now, seeing him standing there in front of her, she realized something terrifying. Time had erased nothing. Every memory returned at once: the late-night conversations, the promises they made as young lovers, the dreams they had built together, and the heartbreak of watching him disappear from her life without explanation. Her heart began beating uncontrollably. "Long time no see, Sophia." Lucas walked toward her. His voice was warm, familiar, dangerously familiar. Sophia felt her throat tight. "Lucas." For a moment neither of them spoke. 10 years of separation, 10 years of unanswered questions. Yet now they stood only a few feet apart. Lucas smiled softly. "You look even more beautiful than before." Sophia felt her cheeks grow warm. She hated herself for reacting. She was a married woman. She had a husband waiting at home, a husband who loved her, a husband who had never once hurt her. Yet hearing those words from Lucas stirred emotions she thought had long died. "You haven't changed either," she said quietly. Lucas laughed. "We're getting old." Sophia found herself smiling. It felt natural, too natural, as if the years between them had never existed, as if Ethan had never existed. The thought made her uncomfortable. For the first time that evening, guilt flickered inside her chest, a brief warning, one she ignored. Hours later, Sophia arrived home. The apartment lights were still on. Ethan was waiting, as always. The moment he heard the door open, he stood up from the couch. His face brightened immediately. "There you are." His smile was gentle, pure. Sophia suddenly felt unable to meet his eyes. "Sorry, the event ran late." "No problem." Ethan walked over. "Are you hungry? I kept dinner warm." "Least have some tea. I'm tired." Something in her voice sounded distant. Even she noticed it, but Ethan simply nodded. "Okay." No complaints, no questions, no suspicion. The kindness in his eyes only made her guilt worse. That night, while Ethan slept peacefully beside her, Sophia stared at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about Lucas, his smile, his voice, the way he looked at her. Her phone vibrated. A new message: Lucas. Her heartbeat immediately accelerated. She opened it. "Never thought I'd see you again." Sophia stared at the screen. A reply would be harmless, just a conversation, just two old friends reconnecting. At least that was what she told herself. Her fingers moved. "Neither did I." The moment she sent it, something changed. A line had been crossed, a very small line, but crossed nonetheless. The messages continued. The next day, the day after that, and the day after that. At first they discussed ordinary things: work, life, travel, old classmates. But gradually the conversations became longer, more personal, more intimate. Every notification from Lucas made Sophia smile. Every message felt like a piece of the past returning. Meanwhile, Ethan noticed the changes. Sophia smiled at her phone more often. She seemed distracted during dinner. Sometimes she would stare into space while thinking. But Ethan never questioned her. Trust had become second nature. And perhaps part of him feared the answer. One evening, Ethan stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie. Tomorrow was their anniversary. 7 years. He wanted everything to be perfect. He picked up the necklace he had bought, a delicate silver pendant with a small sapphire at its center. Sophia had once admired it in a store window months ago. She probably didn't even remember. But Ethan remembered everything, every small thing about her. Because loving Sophia had become woven into every part of his existence. He smiled as he imagined her reaction. Tomorrow would be special. Tomorrow they would celebrate together. Tomorrow would remind her how much she meant to him. The next afternoon, Sophia sat inside a quiet cafe. Across from her sat Lucas, their first meeting outside the gala. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The atmosphere felt strangely intimate. dangerously intimate. Sophia kept telling herself she should leave, she should go home, she should cancel this meeting, yet she remained seated. Lucas watched her. "You seem nervous." "I shouldn't be here." "Why?" Sophia hesitated. "I'm married." The words hung between them. Lucas lowered his eyes briefly. A shadow crossed his face. "Are you happy?" The question struck her harder than expected. Happy? Was she happy? She had success, wealth, stability, a husband who adored her. Yet for some reason she couldn't answer immediately. The silence itself became an answer. Lucas smiled bitterly. "I understand." And somehow those two words made Sophia feel seen in a way she hadn't felt for years. Neither of them realized that a familiar figure had just entered the cafe. Ethan. He had come to pick up a cake for their anniversary. Through the glass window he spotted Sophia. For an instant joy filled his face. Then he saw the man sitting opposite her. The way she smiled, the way she looked at him, the way her eyes sparkled. A sparkle Ethan hadn't seen directed at himself for a very long time. His footsteps stopped. His heart suddenly felt heavy, but he didn't enter, he didn't interrupt, he didn't call her name. Instead, he quietly turned around and left. The anniversary cake remained uncollected. That evening, Ethan sat alone in the dark apartment. The dining table had already been prepared. Candles, flowers, the necklace, the handwritten letter, everything was ready. Everything except Sophia. His phone displayed a message. "Working late tonight. Don't wait for me." Ethan stared at those words for a long time, then he slowly placed the phone down. Outside, rain began falling. Inside, the candles remained unlit. And for the first time in 7 years, a tiny crack appeared in Ethan's heart, not because he knew the truth, but because somewhere deep inside him, he was beginning to fear it. Chapter 3. The first betrayal. The anniversary dinner remained untouched. The candles had burned down to puddles of wax, the flowers had begun to wilt, and the carefully wrapped sapphire necklace sat alone on the table. Ethan remained seated long after midnight. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt unbearably loud. At 1:17 a.m., the front door finally opened. Sophia walked in. She looked surprised to find Ethan still awake. "Still up?" Ethan forced a smile. "I wanted to wait for you." A brief flicker of guilt crossed Sophia's face, only a brief flicker. "Sorry, work got busy." The lie came naturally, too naturally. Ethan looked at her for several seconds. He wanted to ask questions. He wanted to ask where she had been, who she had been with, why she smelled faintly of a cologne that wasn't his. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he simply nodded. "You must be tired." Sophia's guilt deepened. His kindness always made her feel worse. She noticed the decorated table, the flowers, the candles, the untouched food, the gift box. Her heart squeezed painfully. Their anniversary she had forgotten, completely forgotten. For a moment she almost apologized, almost. But then her phone vibrated. Lucas, the screen lit up, and the guilt disappeared beneath a wave of excitement. Sophia quickly locked her phone, but Ethan had already seen her smile, a smile brighter than any she had given him in months. Something inside his chest tightened. Over the following weeks, Sophia and Lucas grew closer, far closer than friends should. They had lunch together, coffee together, dinner together, long phone calls late at night, endless messages throughout the day. The emotional boundary between them gradually disappeared. Sophia told herself repeatedly that she wasn't cheating. Nothing physical had happened, nothing inappropriate, no kisses, no touching, no intimacy, just conversations, just friendship, just memories. But deep down she knew the truth. The first betrayal of a marriage doesn't begin with a kiss. It begins when someone's heart starts belonging to another person, and her heart was already drifting away. One evening, Ethan stood outside Sophia's office holding an umbrella. Heavy rain poured from the sky. Sophia had mentioned earlier that she would be working late. He wanted to surprise her. Maybe they could have dinner together. Maybe things would feel normal again. Maybe he was worrying for nothing. As he entered the lobby, he froze. Across the street stood Sophia, laughing, smiling under Lucas's umbrella. They looked completely absorbed in each other. Neither noticed Ethan. Lucas gently moved a strand of wet hair from Sophia's face. A small gesture, a harmless gesture. Yet Ethan felt as though someone had stabbed a knife into his heart. For several moments he stood motionless. Rain soaked his clothes, but he barely noticed. Sophia looked happier than he had seen her in years, and she wasn't with him. Ethan quietly turned around. The dinner reservation remained unused again. That night Sophia returned home. Ethan was sitting on the balcony. The city lights glittered below. He looked strangely distant. Sophia felt uneasy. "Why are you sitting out here? I couldn't sleep." "You okay?" Ethan looked at her. His eyes were gentle, but something was different, something quieter, more tired. "Who is Lucas?" Sophia's entire body froze. For one terrifying second she thought everything had been discovered. Her pulse raced. What? The man from the gala. Ethan smiled faintly. "You mentioned him once before." Sophia quickly regained her composure. Oh, relief flooded through her. "He's an old friend." Ethan nodded. "Just a friend?" The question sounded casual, but Sophia felt cornered, of course. The lie left her mouth effortlessly. Ethan stared at her for several seconds, then smiled. "I see. No argument, no accusation, no suspicion." Yet for some reason Sophia felt worse than if he had yelled. The next morning, Ethan left for work early. After he was gone, Sophia entered his study looking for a document. While searching through a drawer, she found a small notebook. Curious, she opened it. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes. Every page was about her. Sophia's favorite flowers, Sophia's favorite foods, places Sophia wanted to visit, dreams Sophia once mentioned, tiny details she herself had forgotten. One page stopped her cold, a dated entry from 3 years earlier. Sophia looked exhausted today. "Pretended she was fine, but I know she's worried about the project. I'll stay up tonight and finish the financial report for her so she can rest." Another entry. Sophia smiled today when she saw the sunset. "I should take her somewhere with a better view next weekend." Another. She forgot her umbrella again. "Good thing I brought an extra." And another. "I hope she's happy. That's enough for me." Sophia felt a strange ache in her chest. Ethan had noticed everything, every small detail, every little emotion. Every silent struggle. Meanwhile, she couldn't even remember what Ethan's favorite food was anymore. Her eyes became moist. But before she could think further, her phone vibrated. Lucas. Instantly, her attention shifted, the ache faded, the guilt retreated, and she grabbed her purse. That evening, Lucas invited Sophia to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The skyline glowed beneath the stars. The atmosphere was romantic, dangerously romantic. Sophia knew she shouldn't be there. Yet she came anyway. Lucas looked at her quietly. "Sophia. H.M. If things had been different." She immediately knew what he meant. Her heart pounded. Neither spoke for several seconds. The city lights flickered below. The wind carried distant sounds from the streets. Then Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. Sophia didn't pull away, not immediately. For 3 long seconds, 5, 10, she simply sat there, allowing it, knowing it was wrong, knowing Ethan would be devastated if he saw it. Finally, she withdrew her hand. The damage was already done, because the betrayal was no longer emotional alone. For the first time, Sophia had consciously crossed a line, and deep inside her heart she knew it. At the same moment, Ethan sat alone at home. A cold dinner rested on the table. The chair opposite him remained empty again. His phone displayed Sophia's message. "Working late tonight." Ethan stared at the words, then slowly opened his laptop, for the first time in 7 years. He began looking through old photographs, wedding photos, vacation photos, birthday photos, thousands of memories, and for the first time, instead of happiness, they brought pain, because Ethan was finally beginning to understand a truth he had refused to face. The woman he loved with all his heart was slowly falling in love with someone else, and although he still didn't know the full extent of the betrayal, his heart had already started breaking. Chapter 4. Winter arrived quietly. The city streets became colder, the days became shorter, and Ethan's marriage began dying one disappointment at a time, not through explosive arguments, not through dramatic confrontations, but through countless moments where Sophia chose someone else. Every choice seemed small on its own, yet together they slowly shattered a man's heart. One Friday evening, Ethan stood inside an upscale restaurant. A private dining room had been reserved weeks earlier. It was Sophia's birthday. He had spent days preparing everything. Her favorite flowers filled the room. A custom cake sat in the center of the table. Several close friends and colleagues had been invited. Everyone was waiting and waiting and waiting. Sophia never arrived. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. One by one, they checked their phones. The atmosphere grew increasingly awkward. Finally, Ethan's phone vibrated. A message from Sophia. Something came up. "Sorry, celebrate without me." That was all. No explanation, no phone call. Nothing. Ethan stared at the message. His fingers tightened around the phone. Across the table, one of Sophia's friends spoke carefully. Maybe she got stuck in a meeting. Everyone knew it was a lie. Sophia had become famous for canceling plans recently, especially plans involving Ethan. Still, nobody wanted to say it aloud. Ethan smiled politely. It's okay. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. At that exact moment, Sophia was sitting across from Lucas in a rooftop bar. The city lights glittered beneath them. Lucas handed her a small gift box. I remembered your birthday. Sophia felt touched, more touched than she should have. When she opened the box, she found an elegant silver bracelet. Beautiful, simple, thoughtful. Lucas smiled. Happy birthday. Sophia smiled back, completely unaware that her husband was sitting alone in a restaurant filled with empty chairs and fading candles. The humiliation didn't end there. It grew, week after week, month after month. People began noticing. At business events, Sophia and Lucas often arrived together. They laughed together, talked together, disappeared together. Rumors spread quickly. Some assumed Lucas was her boyfriend. Others assumed Ethan and Sophia had already separated. A few people even forgot Sophia was married. Every rumor eventually found its way back to Ethan. Every whisper, every sideways glance, every sympathetic look, he heard them all. Yet he never defended himself, never confronted anyone, never created a scene. Instead, he endured everything in silence. One afternoon, Ethan attended a company charity event as Sophia's husband. The event hall buzzed with conversation. Sophia was speaking with executives. Lucas stood beside her. The two looked comfortable together, natural, almost intimate. Ethan approached. The moment Sophia noticed him, surprise flashed across her face as though she had forgotten he would be there. Came to support you, she nodded distractedly. Happiness, not gratitude, not affection. Simply surprise. Lucas extended his hand politely. Ethan, nice to finally meet you. Ethan shook his hand. The two men looked at each other. One was the husband, the other was the man slowly stealing his wife's heart. Yet Lucas seemed completely relaxed, because he already knew who Sophia was choosing. And Ethan knew it too. Neither said it aloud. They didn't need to. Later that evening, Ethan overheard something. A conversation between two executives. Neither realized he was nearby. I honestly thought Sophia and Lucas were together. Me too. What about her husband? I don't know. Poor guy. The word struck harder than any insult. Poor guy. That was what people called him now. Not Ethan, not Sophia's husband. Just a man people pitied. A man everyone knew was being replaced except himself. Or perhaps they believed he didn't know. The truth was much worse. He knew. He simply couldn't stop loving her. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study. The room was dark except for a small desk lamp. On his desk lay dozens of photographs, wedding photos, holiday photos, anniversary photos, memories from 7 years together. He picked up one picture. Sophia was smiling brightly, her arms wrapped around him. The happiness in her eyes looked genuine, real, not forced, not fake. Ethan stared at the image for a long time. Then he quietly asked a question nobody could answer. When did we lose each other? The silence offered no reply. Meanwhile, Sophia was beginning to notice changes in Ethan. Small changes, subtle changes, changes that should have comforted her. Instead, they made her uneasy. He stopped asking where she was going, stopped asking when she would come home, stopped calling during the day, stopped waiting up every night. The man who had once centered his entire world around her was slowly withdrawing. Yet Sophia misunderstood. She assumed Ethan was finally learning to be independent. She even felt relieved. Now she could spend more time with Lucas without feeling guilty. Or so she thought. One rainy evening, Sophia returned home unusually early. The apartment was dark, quiet, empty. For a brief moment, panic flashed through her chest. Ethan. No answer. She checked the kitchen. Nothing. The living room. Nothing. Finally, she found him on the balcony, sitting alone, watching the rain. He looked strangely peaceful, yet also heartbreakingly distant. Sophia approached slowly. What are you doing out here? Ethan smiled faintly. Just thinking. About what? His gaze remained fixed on the rain. Life. Something about his voice frightened her, not because he sounded angry, because he sounded resigned, as if he had already accepted something painful. That night after Sophia fell asleep, Ethan remained awake. The city lights flickered outside the bedroom window. Beside him, Sophia slept peacefully, unaware of the storm raging inside his heart. For months he had endured everything, the lies, the neglect, the humiliation, the loneliness. He had hoped things would improve, hoped she would come back to him, hoped their marriage could still be saved. But hope was becoming harder to hold on to, because every day Sophia moved closer to Lucas. And every day she moved further away from him, Ethan gently looked at her sleeping face. The face he had loved for 7 years, the face he would have sacrificed everything for. A tear quietly rolled down his cheek, then another, and another, for the first time since their wedding day. Ethan cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears falling in the darkness, because deep down he was beginning to realize something terrifying. The woman he loved most in the world might never choose him again. And perhaps the most painful part was this: she didn't even seem to notice she was losing him. Chapter 5. There comes a moment in every broken relationship when hope finally dies, not all at once, not with a dramatic confrontation, not with shouting, not with tears. Hope dies quietly, like the final flicker of a candle before darkness consumes the room. For Ethan, that moment arrived on a cold Tuesday evening. And after that night, nothing would ever be the same. Sophia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, carefully applying makeup. A faint smile rested on her lips. She looked happier than she had in months. Ethan watched from the doorway silently. She hadn't noticed him. She was too busy typing messages on her phone. The smile that appeared on her face every few seconds felt like a knife twisting inside his chest. Years ago, that smile belonged to him. Now it belonged to someone else. Ethan, Sophia finally noticed him. You startled me. Sorry, he smiled gently. You look beautiful. For a moment, guilt appeared in her eyes, only for a moment. Thank you. Meeting tonight? Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Another lie Ethan already knew. He simply wanted to see if she would tell the truth. She didn't. An hour later, Sophia left. The apartment became silent. Ethan sat alone on the couch, his eyes fixed on the front door long after it had closed. A strange calm had settled inside him. The pain was still there. But something else had joined it: acceptance. For months he had avoided the truth, made excuses, ignored obvious signs, clung desperately to hope. But hope was becoming impossible to defend. Around 9 o'clock, Ethan's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number attached was a photograph. Ethan frowned, then opened it. The world stopped. His breathing stopped. Everything stopped. The photo showed Sophia and Lucas inside a luxury restaurant, sitting beside each other, not across from each other, beside each other. Lucas's hand rested on top of hers. Sophia wasn't pulling away. Instead, she was smiling. A smile Ethan hadn't received in years. Another image arrived. Then another, each one more painful than the last. The final photograph shattered whatever remained of Ethan's heart. Lucas leaned forward, Sophia closed her eyes, and their lips met. For a long time, Ethan simply stared at the screen. No tears came, no anger came, no screaming, nothing, just silence, complete silence, the kind of silence that exists after something precious dies. Months of suspicion, months of denial, months of hope, all destroyed by a single photograph. The evidence was undeniable. His wife had chosen another man, not emotionally, not accidentally, not innocently, completely, deliberately, knowingly. The apartment felt colder than ever. Ethan slowly stood, walked toward the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water. His hands trembled. The glass slipped, shattered against the floor. Yet he didn't react. Broken glass scattered around his feet, much like his marriage, much like his heart. At midnight, Sophia finally returned home. She looked radiant, happy, almost glowing. The sight nearly broke Ethan. Because he knew exactly why. She wasn't happy because of him. She hadn't been for a long time. Ethan, she noticed him sitting in darkness. Why aren't you asleep? I couldn't. Sophia felt slightly uncomfortable. Everything okay? Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the final time as his wife. The woman before him was still beautiful, still familiar, still the woman he loved, and somehow also a stranger. Yeah, his voice was calm, too calm. Everything's fine. Sophia relaxed. She never noticed the devastation hiding behind his eyes. Never noticed that the man sitting before her had just watched his entire world collapse. That night Ethan didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his study. Old photographs covered the desk. 7 years of memories, 7 years of love, 7 years of sacrifice. He opened a wedding album. The first page showed Sophia in her wedding dress. She looked breathtaking, happy, hopeful, young. Ethan gently touched the photograph, then laughed softly. The sound carried no joy. Only sadness. How did we get here? No answer came, only silence. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan opened a drawer. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, letters he had written to Sophia over the years, letters she had never seen, words he was too shy to say aloud, memories, promises, dreams. He read them one by one. And with each letter, another piece of his heart broke, because every page proved the same thing. He had loved her completely, with everything he had, and it still wasn't enough. As dawn approached, Ethan made a decision. A simple decision, a painful decision, a final decision. He would leave, not tomorrow, not after another argument, not after begging her to stay. He would leave quietly, the same way he had loved her, without demanding anything in return, without creating a scandal, without revenge, without hatred, because despite everything, he still couldn't bring himself to hate Sophia. The next morning, Sophia woke up feeling unusually cheerful. Lucas had confessed his feelings the night before. A part of her felt guilty, but another part felt excited, alive. She walked into the kitchen expecting breakfast. As always, coffee. As always, everything prepared as always, and it was. Ethan moved around the kitchen calmly, smiling softly, acting exactly the same. Sophia relaxed. She had feared he might suspect something. Clearly he didn't. She couldn't have been more wrong, because at that very moment, Ethan had already begun saying goodbye in his heart. And once a heart begins saying goodbye, the relationship is already over. That afternoon, Ethan visited a lawyer. The consultation lasted less than an hour. When he emerged from the building, he looked strangely peaceful, not happy, never happy, but peaceful, as though a man who had been drowning for months had finally stopped struggling against the water. The lawyer handed him a folder. Inside were divorce papers, simple, clean, final. Ethan stared at them for several seconds, then carefully closed the folder. His eyes filled with tears, not because he doubted his decision, because he never imagined his love story would end this way, not with hatred, not with war, but with silence, the silence of a man whose heart had finally broken beyond repair. Chapter 6. The divorce papers sat inside Ethan's desk drawer for nearly 2 weeks, 14 days, 14 nights, 14 opportunities to change his mind. Yet every day that passed only strengthened his decision, because while he was struggling to let go of 7 years of love, Sophia was becoming increasingly distant. She no longer noticed when he came home late. She no longer noticed when he skipped meals. She no longer noticed the dark circles beneath his eyes. The woman who had once promised to share every joy and sorrow with him seemed completely absorbed in another world, a world that no longer included him. One evening, Ethan stood alone in their bedroom. The room was filled with memories, photographs from vacations, wedding pictures, small souvenirs collected over 7 years. Every object carried a story. Every story carried a piece of his heart. His gaze landed on a photograph taken during their first year of marriage. Sophia was laughing. The kind of laugh that made her eyes sparkle. Back then, she had looked at him as though he were her entire world. Or perhaps he had only imagined it. Ethan wasn't sure anymore. Slowly, he removed the photograph from its frame, then another. And another. He carefully packed them into a box, not because he hated the memories, because they hurt too much. Meanwhile, Sophia was sitting in Lucas's luxury apartment. A glass of wine rested in her hand. The city lights glittered through the massive windows behind them. Lucas sat beside her, closer than before, closer than he should have been. Sophia knew she was crossing boundaries. She knew she was betraying her marriage. Yet every time guilt surfaced, she pushed it away. She convinced herself that Ethan would never leave, never stop loving her, never walk away, because he never had before. That belief made her careless, dangerously careless. A week later, Ethan finished organizing everything: the apartment, the bank accounts, the investments, the shared assets. He left Sophia nearly everything. The apartment they lived in, most of their savings, even several investments that legally belonged to him. His lawyer had been shocked. "Are you sure?" Ethan had simply nodded. "I don't want anything from her." Lawyer frowned. After what happened, Ethan looked away. His voice was quiet. "I loved her." As though those 3 words explained everything. Perhaps they did. That Friday afternoon, Sophia received a call from Ethan. His voice sounded unusually calm. "Can you come home tonight?" "Why?" "I need your signature on some documents." Sophia barely paid attention. She was preparing for a weekend trip with Lucas. "Okay, thank you." The call ended. Neither realized it would be one of the last normal conversations they would ever have. That evening, Sophia arrived home later than expected. Ethan was sitting in the living room. The folder rested on the coffee table. He looked composed, too composed. Sophia noticed but thought little of it. "What documents?" Ethan pushed the folder toward her. "There's some paperwork." She sat down casually, completely unaware that her future was sitting in front of her. Sophia opened the folder, several pages, dense legal language, multiple signatures required. She barely glanced at them. Her phone buzzed. Lucas. A smile instantly appeared on her face. Ethan saw it. And something inside him finally stopped hurting, not because the pain disappeared, because the truth had become undeniable even now. Even at this moment, her attention was elsewhere, not on him, not on their marriage, not on the life they had built together. "Up, Lucas is waiting." The word slipped out before Sophia realized what she had said. The room became silent, a heavy silence. Sophia finally looked up. For a brief second she noticed something strange in Ethan's expression, sadness, exhaustion, and a quiet finality she couldn't understand. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I mean, I have plans." Ethan smiled faintly. "Of course." Smile made her uncomfortable because it wasn't his usual smile. There was warmth, but there was also distance, as though he were already far away. Without reading carefully, Sophia began signing page after page, signature after signature. Her mind was already with Lucas, thinking about their weekend, thinking about their future, thinking about everything except the man sitting across from her. When she reached the final page, she signed without hesitation, then pushed the folder back. There. Ethan looked down. His eyes settled on the signature. Sophia Bennett Carter, written clearly, legally binding, the final signature on their divorce agreement. For a moment neither spoke. 7 years. 7 years reduced to ink on paper. Sophia stood up. Anything else? Ethan looked at her, the woman he had loved for most of his adult life. The woman for whom he had sacrificed dreams, money, sleep, and pieces of himself. The woman he would have followed anywhere. The woman who no longer loved him. His throat tightened painfully. No. She grabbed her purse. "Okay, I'll be back Sunday." Ethan nodded. "Have a safe trip." Again that strange smile, again that strange calmness, yet Sophia ignored both, because she believed there would always be another conversation, another dinner, another chance. She believed Ethan would always be there, waiting, as he always had. The front door closed. Silence filled the apartment. Ethan remained seated for several minutes. The signed divorce papers rested in front of him. A single tear slid down his cheek. Then another. Then another. For the first time since making his decision, he allowed himself to cry, not because he regretted leaving, because the reality had finally become real. The marriage was over. Sophia simply didn't know it yet. Late that night, Ethan entered their bedroom. Sophia's side of the bed was empty. For years, he had imagined growing old beside her. Now he would be leaving everything behind. He opened the closet, packed a single suitcase, just enough clothing for a new beginning. No photographs. No keepsakes. No reminders, because carrying those memories would only make leaving harder. As dawn approached, Ethan sat by the window watching the sunrise. The city slowly awakened below. Cars filled the streets. Lights flickered on. Life continued, as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. Behind him sat a signed divorce agreement. In front of him waited an uncertain future. And somewhere far away, Sophia was probably smiling at Lucas, completely unaware that while she was planning a future with another man, her husband was quietly preparing to disappear from her life forever. Chapter 7. The weekend passed quickly for Sophia, too quickly. For the first time in years, she felt carefree. She spent 2 days with Lucas at a luxury resort outside the city. The atmosphere was romantic. The weather was perfect. The scenery was beautiful. And yet, every now and then, an uncomfortable feeling would appear inside her chest, a strange uneasiness she couldn't explain. It happened whenever she saw a husband helping his wife carry luggage, or when she watched an elderly couple walking hand in hand, or when her phone remained unusually quiet, because throughout the entire weekend, Ethan never called, not once. In the past, Ethan would have called several times asking if she had eaten, reminding her to carry a jacket, checking whether she arrived safely, sending small messages throughout the day. Sometimes Sophia found those habits annoying, overprotective, predictable. Yet now the silence felt strangely unsettling. She checked her phone several times. No messages. No missed calls, nothing. A small voice inside her mind whispered that something wasn't right. She ignored it. Meanwhile, Ethan stood inside an airport terminal. One suitcase rested beside him. Nothing more. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of memories, 7 years of love, reduced to a single suitcase. He looked surprisingly calm, not because he wasn't hurting, because he had already cried all the tears he could cry. The pain had become something deeper, something quieter, a wound too profound for tears. His phone vibrated, one final notification. The divorce had been officially processed. He was no longer a married man. Ethan stared at the screen, then slowly switched off the phone. Forever, a chapter of his life had ended. Before leaving, he had returned to the apartment one last time, the place that had once been his home. The place where he and Sophia had built their life together. The place where he had laughed, dreamed, loved, and eventually suffered. He walked through each room slowly. The living room, the kitchen, the balcony where he had spent countless nights waiting for her. Every corner carried memories, some beautiful, some painful, most of them both. Finally, he placed a single envelope on the dining table. A letter, not a letter filled with accusations, not a letter filled with anger, just goodbye, because even now, he couldn't bring himself to hurt her. The flight announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers began boarding. Ethan stood, took a deep breath, and walked forward, without looking back. Sunday evening. Sophia returned home. She entered the apartment carrying shopping bags. The moment she stepped inside, she frowned. The apartment felt unusually quiet. Ethan. No answer. She removed her shoes. Ethan. Still nothing. The silence felt strange, heavy, almost uncomfortable. She checked the kitchen, empty, the balcony, empty, the study, empty, no sign of him anywhere. A slight irritation appeared. Where did he go? Then she noticed something, the dining table, an envelope, her name written neatly across the front. Sophia froze. For reasons she couldn't explain, her heart suddenly began beating faster. Slowly, she picked it up, opened it, and began reading. Sophia, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The first sentence made her frown. Gone, what did that mean? She continued reading. For 7 years, loving you was the happiest thing I ever did. I never regretted choosing you, not once. Even now, I don't regret it. Sophia's heartbeat quickened. A strange feeling settled inside her stomach. I know about Lucas. The paper nearly slipped from her fingers. Her face turned pale. The room suddenly felt cold, very cold. I knew for longer than you think. At first, I wanted to believe I was wrong. Then I hoped things would change. I kept waiting for you to choose us. But eventually, I realized you already had. Sophia's hands began trembling. No, the whisper escaped her lips. I don't hate you. I don't blame you. Love can't be forced. And perhaps somewhere along the way, I stopped being the person you wanted beside you. A tear landed on the paper. Sophia didn't realize she was crying. The apartment is yours. The savings are yours. Everything has been arranged. You don't need to worry about anything. The words became increasingly blurred, not because of the ink, because tears were falling faster now. You once asked me what I feared most. I never answered. The truth is that I was always afraid of losing you. Funny, isn't it? In the end, that's exactly what happened. Sophia covered her mouth. A sob escaped. Her chest hurt, actually hurt. As if something was squeezing her heart. Don't look for me. Live the life you want. Be happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. The final line shattered her completely. Goodbye, Sophia. Ethan, the letter slipped from her fingers. For several seconds she simply stood there, motionless, unable to think, unable to breathe properly, unable to process what had happened. Then reality struck. Like lightning, the divorce papers, the documents she signed, the strange smile, the strange calmness, the silence, the goodbye. Everything suddenly made sense. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the floor. No. Tears streamed down her face. No. Her voice broke. He wouldn't leave. More tears. He can't leave. 7 years, Ethan had always been there, always waiting, always forgiving, always loving, always staying. Sophia had built her entire life around one certainty: Ethan would never leave. And now he was gone. Panic surged through her. She grabbed her phone, called him. The number was disconnected. She called again, and again, and again. Nothing. She opened social media. His accounts were gone. She contacted mutual friends. Nobody knew where he was, or perhaps they weren't telling her. For the first time in 7 years, Sophia couldn't find Ethan. And for the first time in 7 years, she walked through an apartment that no longer felt like home. No warm dinner, no gentle smile, no voice asking if she was tired, no man waiting for her, only silence, endless silence. The silence left behind by the person who had loved her most. And as Sophia sat alone on the floor clutching Ethan's goodbye letter, a terrifying realization slowly formed in her heart. She had spent months chasing the man she thought she wanted, only to discover she had lost the man who had truly loved her. And for the very first time, she was afraid. Chapter 8. For 3 days, Sophia barely slept. The apartment remained exactly as Ethan had left it. His coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet. His favorite books remained on the shelves. His slippers were still beside the bedroom door. Everything was there, everything except him. And somehow that made it worse. Every object became a reminder. Every room felt haunted, not by a ghost, but by absence. The first morning after reading the letter, Sophia woke up automatically at 7. For a few confused seconds, she stared at the ceiling. Then habit took over. Ethan. Silence. Reality crashed into her once again. He was gone. The side of the bed beside her was cold, empty, untouched. For 7 years she had woken up beside him. Now there was nothing. Sophia dragged herself out of bed. Normally breakfast would already be waiting, fresh coffee, toast, sometimes pancakes on weekends. Ethan always remembered, even when she forgot. Today the kitchen was silent. No smell of coffee. No sounds of cooking, nothing. Sophia opened the refrigerator. Inside were neatly labeled meal containers prepared by Ethan before he left. The dates were written carefully on each lid: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Even now, even after deciding to leave, he had worried about whether she would eat properly. Sophia stared at the containers, then suddenly burst into tears. That evening Lucas came over. He brought flowers, expensive wine, a bright smile, everything Sophia thought she wanted. Everything she had been chasing for months. Lucas wrapped his arms around her. You don't have to think about him anymore. Those words should have comforted her. Instead, they made her uncomfortable because for some reason, she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Over dinner, Lucas talked about future plans, trips they could take together, places they could visit, the possibility of moving in together. Sophia listened quietly, but her attention kept drifting elsewhere. Every time she glanced toward the kitchen, she remembered Ethan cooking. Every time she looked at the balcony, she remembered Ethan sitting there waiting for her. Every time her phone buzzed, part of her expected a message from him. A message that never came. Lucas eventually frowned, distracted. I'm sorry, you're thinking about him. Sophia looked away because she couldn't deny it. Lucas sighed. He's your ex-husband now. The words felt strange. Ex-husband. The man who had been her family for 7 years was suddenly reduced to 2 syllables. Ex-husband. Sophia hated how cold it sounded. Days turned into weeks. Something unexpected happened. The excitement Sophia had once felt around Lucas began fading, slowly, quietly, relentlessly, because reality was different from fantasy, very different. The Lucas she had loved years ago existed mostly in memory. The real Lucas was not that person. The real Lucas became impatient when she worked late. The real Lucas disliked compromise. The real Lucas expected attention, constant attention. Meanwhile, Ethan had spent 7 years giving attention without ever demanding it. The comparison appeared unintentionally, yet it appeared constantly. And Lucas always lost. One Friday evening, Sophia arrived home exhausted after a difficult day at work. Her head ached. Her entire body felt heavy. Without thinking, she called out, "Ethan, can you make?" The words stopped. The apartment was empty. Silence answered her. Sophia stood frozen, then slowly sat down on the couch and cried, not because she missed having someone make tea, because she finally understood how much Ethan had done every single day. Thousands of small acts of love she had treated as ordinary, thousands of sacrifices she never noticed, thousands of moments she took for granted. The worst part wasn't losing him. The worst part was realizing his value only after he was gone. One rainy afternoon, Sophia found herself searching through old photo albums. At first she intended only to organize them. Instead she spent hours staring at memories. There was Ethan helping her move into her first apartment, Ethan cheering at her graduation, Ethan standing beside her during her first promotion, Ethan holding her hand after her father's surgery, Ethan smiling, always looking at her with love. Sophia noticed something she had never paid attention to before. In every photograph, Ethan's eyes were focused on her, not the camera, not himself, her. As though she had always been the center of his universe. The realization made her chest ache. Later that night, Lucas invited her to a party. Months ago she would have accepted immediately. Tonight she declined. "I don't feel like going." Lucas sounded irritated. "Been rejecting me a lot lately. I'm just tired." Or maybe you're regretting your decision. Accusation struck deeper than he intended, because a small part of her knew it was true, not just a small part, a growing part, a part she could no longer ignore. After ending the call, Sophia wandered into Ethan's old study. The room remained untouched. She sat in his chair, opened random drawers and found something unexpected, a small notebook. The same notebook she had briefly seen weeks ago. This time she read everything, page after page, year after year, entries filled with tiny observations, tiny worries, tiny hopes, all about her. One entry made her break down completely. Sophia looked sad today. She said she was fine, but her eyes looked lonely. I'll take her somewhere nice this weekend. Maybe it will make her smile. Another, she worked until midnight again. I wish I could carry some of her burdens for her. Another, I hope she never feels alone as long as I'm here. Sophia covered her mouth, sobs shook her body, because she suddenly realized something devastating. For years she had searched for grand romantic gestures, passion, excitement, butterflies. Meanwhile, Ethan had been loving her in 1,000 quiet ways every single day. And she never truly saw it. That night, Sophia sat alone on the balcony. Rain fell softly across the city. The same balcony where Ethan had waited for her countless times. The same balcony where he had cried alone. The same balcony where he had finally accepted losing her. For the first time, Sophia tried imagining those moments from his perspective. The waiting, the loneliness, the humiliation, the heartbreak. The realization that the woman he loved was choosing someone else. The pain nearly became unbearable. As midnight approached, Sophia looked at the empty chair beside her, the chair where Ethan used to sit, a chair she had ignored countless times. Now she would have given anything to see him sitting there again, anything. But wishes were useless, because Ethan was gone. And for the first time since his disappearance, Sophia understood a truth she had desperately avoided. Lucas was not the answer. Lucas had never been the answer. The problem wasn't that she had chosen the wrong man. The problem was that she had abandoned the right one. A fresh wave of tears rolled down her cheeks. Far away, somewhere in another city, Ethan was beginning a new life. And for the first time in years, Sophia found herself wondering whether she deserved to be part of it. Chapter 9. Regret never arrives all at once. It doesn't crash into someone's life like a storm. Instead, it arrives quietly, a memory here, a realization there, a small ache that grows larger every day, until eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. For Sophia, regret had begun as discomfort. Now it was becoming something much worse, something heavier, something that followed her everywhere. 3 months had passed since Ethan disappeared. 3 months, 90 days. Yet not a single day passed without Sophia thinking about him. Sometimes it happened when she woke up, sometimes while eating dinner, sometimes during meetings, sometimes late at night when the apartment became too quiet. The memories always found her, and they always hurt. One Monday morning, Sophia arrived at work earlier than usual. Her assistant handed her several files. Among them was a folder from a project completed years earlier, a project that had launched her career. A project she had always considered her greatest professional achievement. As she reviewed the document, something caught her attention. A name, Ethan Carter, her eyebrows furrowed. Why was Ethan's name on internal financial reports? Curious, she continued reading. The deeper she looked, the more shocked she became. Years earlier, when her project had been on the verge of collapse, someone had quietly injected emergency funding, enough to save everything, enough to save her career. That investor had been Ethan. Sophia stared at the documents, her hands trembled. She had never known. Not once had he mentioned it. Not once had he taken credit. Not once had he used it to make her feel indebted. He had simply helped her, then stepped back into the shadows, allowing her to shine alone. Tears filled her eyes, because she suddenly remembered what happened shortly after that project succeeded. She had celebrated with coworkers. She had celebrated with clients. She had celebrated with everyone except Ethan. That night he had waited at home, alone, and she never even thanked him. The guilt was becoming unbearable. That evening Sophia visited her mother. It was something she hadn't done in weeks. Her mother immediately noticed something was wrong. Lost weight. I'm fine. No, her mother looked at her carefully. Not. Sophia remained silent. After a long pause, her mother spoke softly. Have you heard from Ethan? The question felt like a knife. Sophia lowered her eyes. No, her mother sighed heavily. then said something unexpected. "You know, I always considered him my son." Sophia's chest tightened. "He was good to you." The words sounded simple, yet they carried enormous weight, because everyone seemed to recognize Ethan's value except the person who should have appreciated him most. Her mother continued. "When your father became ill, Ethan visited every day." Sophia blinked. "What? You didn't know?" She slowly shook her head. Her mother looked surprised. "He never told you." Sophia felt her stomach drop. "No," her mother smiled sadly. "He would bring meals, sit with your father, help with hospital paperwork." Sophia stared in disbelief. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he wasn't doing it for praise." Answer shattered her. Because it sounded exactly like Ethan, quiet, selfless, invisible. That night Sophia returned home emotionally exhausted. She wandered through the apartment without purpose. Then she noticed a storage box she had never opened, one Ethan had left behind. Her heart began beating faster. Slowly she lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of folders, receipts, notes, documents, photographs, and letters. So many letters. Sophia sat on the floor for hours reading, page after page, memory after memory, sacrifice after sacrifice. The deeper she dug, the more she discovered. When she wanted a promotion, Ethan had taken freelance work at night to help cover expenses. When she wanted to start a new business venture, Ethan had secretly sold his vintage motorcycle, the motorcycle he loved. The motorcycle he had dreamed of restoring. He sold it without hesitation, just so she could chase her dream. Sophia stared at the receipt. The sale date matched perfectly. And suddenly she remembered the day she received funding, the day she celebrated, the day she never asked where the money came from. A sob escaped her lips, because Ethan had given up something precious, and she hadn't even noticed. The apartment became blurry through her tears. For years she had convinced herself she wasn't loved enough, that something was missing, that Ethan was too predictable, too safe, too ordinary. Now she realized how blind she had been, because real love wasn't found in grand declarations. It wasn't found in excitement. It wasn't found in butterflies. Real love looked like sacrifice, patience, consistency. And Ethan had given her all of those things, every single day. Meanwhile, her relationship with Lucas continued deteriorating. The differences became harder to ignore. One evening, Sophia arrived 30 minutes late for dinner. Lucas was furious. "Do you know how long I've been waiting?" The question froze her, because suddenly another memory surfaced. Ethan waiting 3 hours on their anniversary alone, without complaining, without anger, without blame, just waiting because he loved her. The comparison hurt. Lucas continued speaking, but Sophia barely heard him. Her thoughts remained elsewhere, with Ethan, always Ethan, increasingly Ethan, and that terrified her. Because she was beginning to understand something she didn't want to admit. She missed him, not casually, not occasionally, deeply, painfully, constantly. That night, after another argument with Lucas, Sophia sat alone on the bedroom floor. The old letter Ethan left behind rested in her hands. She had read it countless times, so many times that she practically knew every word by heart. Yet one sentence always destroyed her. "I kept waiting for you to choose us." Sophia broke down, crying again, because she finally understood the full meaning behind those words. Ethan had given her chance after chance, opportunity after opportunity, reason after reason, and every single time, she had chosen someone else. The realization was devastating, not because Ethan left, not because the marriage ended, but because she now understood that he hadn't left suddenly. He had been leaving for months, piece by piece, hope by hope, heartbreak by heartbreak, and she never noticed. As dawn approached, Sophia sat beside the window watching the sunrise, much like Ethan once had. The city slowly awakened. People began their day, life moved forward, but Sophia felt trapped in the past, trapped inside memories, trapped inside regret. For the first time since Ethan disappeared, she finally admitted the truth aloud. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was wrong." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I was so wrong." Room offered no response, only silence. The same silence Ethan had endured for months. And for the first time, Sophia truly felt what he had felt: loneliness, loss, and the crushing pain of loving someone who was no longer there. Chapter 10. By the 4th month after Ethan's disappearance, Sophia had stopped pretending she was happy, stopped pretending she didn't miss him, stopped pretending her choices hadn't destroyed something precious. The truth had become impossible to escape. She thought about Ethan every day, every single day. And no matter how hard she tried, the memories only became clearer, not weaker, clearer, more painful, more vivid, as though her heart was forcing her to relive every mistake, again and again. Lucas noticed the change. Of course he did. The woman who once smiled whenever he called now seemed distracted, distant, lost. Whenever they were together, Sophia often stared into space, her attention wandering somewhere far away, somewhere he couldn't reach, somewhere he already knew. Ethan. One evening, Lucas invited Sophia to a luxury restaurant. Months earlier, she would have been excited. Now she simply felt tired. The restaurant overlooked the river. Candles illuminated every table. Soft music filled the air. Everything was perfect, everything except them. Lucas talked about business opportunities, future investments, travel plans. Sophia barely listened. Her eyes drifted toward a nearby couple. The husband carefully removed a fish bone from his wife's plate. The wife smiled warmly, a small gesture, nothing remarkable. It had triggered a memory, Ethan doing exactly the same thing for years, without being asked, without expecting thanks, simply because he cared. Sophia suddenly lost her appetite, doing it again. Lucas's voice pulled her back. She blinked. About him. The words hung heavily between them. Sophia couldn't deny it, because denying it would be lying, and she was finally tired of lying. Lucas laughed bitterly. You left him. Statement felt like an accusation and a reminder, both equally painful. You chose me. Sophia lowered her eyes. For some reason, hearing those words no longer brought comfort. Instead, they filled her with regret, because she had chosen. And she had chosen wrong. The dinner ended badly, like most of their recent meetings. What once felt exciting now felt exhausting. Every conversation became an argument. Every disagreement became a conflict. The fantasy she had built around Lucas was slowly collapsing, and reality was far less beautiful. Over the following weeks, Lucas became increasingly possessive. He disliked when Sophia worked late, disliked when she spent time alone, disliked when she canceled plans. Most importantly, he disliked hearing Ethan's name, even accidentally. One Saturday afternoon, Sophia was organizing old files. A photograph slipped from a folder. She picked it up. It was from her first apartment after marriage. The apartment was tiny. The furniture was cheap. The walls needed repainting. Yet both she and Ethan were smiling, genuinely smiling, happy. Lucas happened to walk into the room. The moment he saw the photograph, his expression darkened. Why do you still keep those? Sophia frowned. Of him. His tone sounded irritated, almost angry. Sophia stared at him. Then a memory surfaced. Years ago she had kept photographs of Lucas. Old photographs she should have thrown away. Ethan had discovered them. Yet he never became angry, never demanded she destroy them, never accused her. Instead, he quietly placed them back where he found them, respecting her feelings, even when those feelings hurt him. The comparison struck again, and once again, Lucas lost. That evening, Sophia sat alone in the study. The notebook Ethan had left behind rested in her lap. She opened it randomly, a page from 5 years earlier. Sophia got promoted today. She looked so happy. I wish I had remembered to buy flowers before coming home. Another page. She fell asleep at her desk again. I carried her to bed. She's working too hard. Another. I hope she knows how proud I am of her. Sophia closed the notebook. Tears filled her eyes, because nowhere in those pages did Ethan complain. Not once, not even when he was exhausted, not even when she neglected him, not even when she hurt him. The entire notebook was filled with love, pure love, and she had thrown it away. The final crack appeared 2 weeks later. Sophia arrived at Lucas's apartment unexpectedly. She wanted to talk, wanted to clear the tension between them, wanted to understand why everything felt so wrong. As she approached the door, she heard laughter, a woman's laughter. Her footsteps froze. Slowly, she pushed the door open. Inside sat Lucas, and another woman, a beautiful woman, young, elegant, comfortable, far too comfortable. The scene instantly reminded Sophia of another image. A restaurant, a table, a betrayal, her betrayal. Lucas stood abruptly. Sophia. Panic in his eyes told her everything. She didn't need explanations, didn't need excuses, didn't need lies. She already understood. The irony was almost cruel. The man she abandoned her husband for had betrayed her. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Sophia laughed, a broken laugh, a hollow laugh, because she suddenly realized something. This wasn't karma, this wasn't punishment, this was clarity. The fantasy was finally dead, completely dead. She turned and walked away. Lucas called after her. She didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't care, because for the first time she understood that Lucas had never been the center of her pain. The real pain was Ethan, losing Ethan, hurting Ethan, failing Ethan. That was the wound that refused to heal. Later that night, Sophia returned to the apartment she once shared with her husband. The apartment that still felt full of him. She walked into their bedroom, opened the closet, and found one of Ethan's old sweaters, a sweater he had forgotten, or perhaps intentionally left behind. Sophia held it against her chest. The faint scent was long gone, yet somehow it still felt like him, warm, comforting, safe. The tears came immediately, uncontrollably. She slid down to the floor, holding the sweater tightly. Sobbing into the fabric, months of guilt, months of regret, months of denial finally breaking free. For the first time she admitted the truth completely, not to anyone else, to herself. Love him. The words came out as a whisper broken by tears. I still love him. Another sob escaped. Too late, everything was too late, because the man she finally realized she loved was the man she had already lost, and somewhere far away, Ethan was living a life that no longer revolved around her. A life she might never be part of again. For the first time, that possibility terrified her more than anything else. Chapter 11. By the time autumn arrived, Sophia's life had become a collection of memories. Memories she couldn't escape. Memories she couldn't forget. Memories that seemed determined to follow her wherever she went. The apartment remained quiet, painfully quiet. Every room carried Ethan's shadow. Every corner reminded her of something she had once overlooked. And every day the regret grew heavier. The relationship with Lucas was officially over, not because of the other woman. That had merely been the final crack. The truth was that Sophia had already left that relationship emotionally long before. Her heart wasn't with Lucas anymore. Perhaps it never truly had been. Instead, her heart remained trapped in the past, trapped with the husband she had failed to appreciate. One evening, while sorting through old storage boxes, Sophia discovered a small cardboard container hidden behind several files. She didn't recognize it. Curious, she opened it. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each one carefully labeled. Each one addressed to her, but none had ever been given to her. Her breath caught. They were letters written by Ethan over the course of 7 years. Her trembling fingers opened the first one. The date was from their first year of marriage. Sophia, you fell asleep on the couch again tonight. You looked so tired that I couldn't bear to wake you. Sometimes I worry that you're carrying too much by yourself. I wish I could take away some of that burden. If I could give you a life without stress, I would. A tear slid down her cheek. She opened another, then another, and another. Hours passed. The letters covered the floor around her, each one revealing another piece of Ethan's heart, each one making it harder to breathe. One letter stopped her completely. It had been written shortly after her father's surgery, a period she remembered vividly. She had been terrified, exhausted, emotionally overwhelmed. Seeing you cry outside the hospital broke my heart. I wanted to tell you everything would be okay, but I knew words weren't enough, so I stayed. As long as you needed me, if I could carry your pain for you, I would. Sophia pressed the letter against her chest. Her tears fell freely now, because she remembered that period. She remembered leaning on Ethan, trusting Ethan, depending on Ethan. And somehow, somewhere along the way, she had forgotten all of it. The next day she visited her father. The elderly man sat quietly on the balcony, reading a newspaper. When he saw her red eyes, he immediately understood. Ethan again. Sophia nodded. Her father sighed heavily. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he folded the newspaper. You know something? Sophia looked up. When I was recovering from surgery, there were nights Ethan stayed until 3 in the morning. Her eyes widened. What? He would help the nurses, would bring food, would sit beside me when I couldn't sleep. Sophia stared at him. The shock was overwhelming. Why didn't anyone tell me? Her father's smile was sad. Because he asked us not to. Answer felt like another knife to her heart. Of course he did. That was exactly the kind of man Ethan was, doing good quietly, helping quietly, loving quietly, never asking for recognition. Her father looked out at the sky. To be honest, Sophia, his voice became softer. I was angry when I learned what happened. Sophia lowered her eyes. Shame flooded through her. But not because you divorced, she frowned. Then why? Because you lost someone rare. The words echoed inside her long after she left. Someone rare, not perfect, not wealthy, not powerful, rare, the kind of person who loved completely, the kind of person who gave without keeping score, the kind of person who appeared only once in a lifetime, and she had thrown him away. Days later, Sophia met one of Ethan's former coworkers, an older man named Michael, someone who had worked closely with Ethan for years. When Michael saw her, his expression immediately changed, not hostile, just disappointed, which somehow hurt more. After several minutes of awkward conversation, Michael finally spoke. "Do you know why Ethan always left work exactly at 6? Sophia shook her head. "He said his wife shouldn't have to eat dinner alone." Sophia froze. Michael continued. "People used to make fun of him." "What? He never cared." Michael smiled faintly. "He talked about you constantly." Guilt became unbearable. "Really?" Michael laughed. "Honestly, it was annoying." The first time in months, Sophia smiled through her tears. Then Michael's expression softened. "Never met someone who loved their spouse the way Ethan loved you." Smile vanished. Pain returned immediately, because she knew now far too late. That night Sophia returned home carrying a small box Michael had given her. Inside were photographs from company events. Most showed ordinary moments, work dinners, celebrations, meetings. Then she found one that shattered her completely. A candid photograph, Ethan sitting alone during a company banquet. Everyone else was laughing and talking. Yet Ethan was looking at his phone, smiling. The photograph had captured the screen, a picture of Sophia, his wallpaper. Sophia stared at the image for nearly an hour, unable to move, unable to stop crying, because even in a room full of people, his attention had been on her, always her. Later that night she entered the bedroom. The room felt emptier than ever. She sat on Ethan's side of the bed, a side she rarely touched when he was there. Her fingers brushed across the mattress. And suddenly another memory surfaced. Years ago, a thunderstorm, a power outage. She had been frightened. Without hesitation, Ethan had wrapped his arms around her and stayed awake all night, just to make sure she felt safe. She remembered falling asleep in his embrace, certain that nothing could hurt her. A fresh wave of tears followed, because she finally understood something devastating. Ethan had been her safest place, and she had been the one who destroyed it. Near midnight, Sophia walked onto the balcony. Cold wind brushed against her face. The city lights sparkled below. Months ago she had sat here realizing she missed him. Now the feeling had evolved into something deeper, more painful, more desperate. She didn't simply miss Ethan anymore. She wanted him back, not because she was lonely, not because Lucas disappointed her, not because she regretted her choices, but because she finally understood who Ethan truly was, and what he had meant to her. She looked up at the night sky. Her voice trembled. "I understand now." The words disappeared into the darkness. "I understand everything now." But understanding changed nothing, because Ethan wasn't there to hear her, wasn't there to forgive her, wasn't there to smile and tell her everything would be okay. For the first time in her life, Sophia faced a possibility she couldn't bear, the possibility that the man she finally learned to love might never come back. Chapter 12. The first snowfall of winter arrived quietly. White flakes drifted through the city streets. People hurried home. Couples walked hand in hand beneath umbrellas. Families gathered for the holidays. And Sophia sat alone, staring at Ethan's last letter for what felt like the 1,000th time. Nearly 6 months had passed since he disappeared. 6 months. Yet the pain hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Because regret was no longer enough. Now there was longing. A desperate longing. A desperate need to see him, even once, even from a distance, even if he never forgave her. That morning, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't continue living like this. She had to find Ethan, not to force him back, not to beg for another chance. She simply needed to know he was okay, needed to see him, needed to tell him the words she should have said months ago, the words she should have said years ago. "I'm sorry." Search began with mutual friends, people who had once spent time with both of them. People who had watched their marriage from the sidelines. People who knew what happened. The first call lasted less than 2 minutes. "Do you know where Ethan is?" A long silence followed, then came the answer. "No." Voice sounded cold, polite, but cold. The second call went no better. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Each conversation ended the same way. No information, no help, no clues, nothing. At first Sophia believed they genuinely didn't know. Then she began noticing something. The hesitation. The uncomfortable pauses. The way conversations abruptly ended. Some of them knew, or at least suspected. They simply didn't want to help her. One afternoon, Sophia encountered one of Ethan's closest friends by chance, Daniel, a man who had known Ethan for over a decade, a man who had stood beside Ethan at their wedding. The moment Daniel saw her, his expression darkened, not with hatred, with disappointment, a disappointment so deep it made her chest ache. Daniel, he nodded politely. Sophia, she swallowed hard. Please. Her voice shook. Do you know where Ethan is? Daniel stared at her for several seconds, then sighed. You want the truth? Sophia nodded. No more than you think. Hope immediately appeared inside her eyes, but Daniel's next words crushed it. And I'm not telling you. Sophia felt as though she had been struck. Why? The question came out almost as a whisper. Daniel laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because he was tired of remembering what his friend had endured. Do you know what Ethan looked like after you left? The question caught her off guard. She remained silent. I do. Daniel's eyes hardened. I watched him stop eating. I watched him lose weight. I watched him sit alone for hours. I watched him pretend he was okay. Every word felt like a knife. He never blamed you. Daniel shook his head. Once. Disappointment in his voice became almost unbearable. He still defended you. Sophia lowered her eyes. Tears began forming. Even after everything. Daniel laughed bitterly. He still loved you. The tears spilled over because she knew now, and that knowledge hurt more than anything. So please tell me where he is. Her voice broke. I just want to see him. Daniel stared at her for a long time, then quietly replied. And what happens after that? Sophia froze. You find him. Daniel continued. You apologize. You cry. You tell him you regret everything. His voice remained calm. But what then? Sophia had no answer because she didn't know. She truly didn't know. Daniel's expression softened slightly for the first time. You know what Ethan wanted more than anything? She shook her head. One word, only one word, yet it nearly destroyed her. He wanted you to choose him. Daniel looked away. You didn't. Silence that followed felt endless. Before leaving, Daniel spoke one final sentence, a sentence that would remain with Sophia forever. Sometimes regret arrives after the opportunity is gone. Then he walked away, leaving Sophia standing alone. Frozen, heartbroken, and unable to argue, because every word was true. Weeks passed. The search continued. She hired private investigators, contacted former colleagues, visited places Ethan used to frequent. Nothing. It was as though he had vanished from the world. Christmas arrived, the first Christmas without Ethan. The apartment felt colder than ever. For 7 years, Ethan had decorated everything, the tree, the lights, the gifts, even the cookies. Sophia never realized how much effort it required. Because Ethan always handled it, smiling, without complaint. This year she decorated alone. And halfway through hanging ornaments she broke down crying, because every decoration reminded her of him. Every tradition reminded her of him. Everything reminded her of him. That night she discovered something hidden among the Christmas decorations. A small envelope yellowed with age, her name written on the front, Ethan's handwriting. With trembling fingers she opened it. Inside was a note, short, simple, years old. For Sophia, in case you're ever having a difficult day, remember this: you are stronger than you think, braver than you realize, and more loved than you know. Ethan, the note slipped from her fingers, and for the first time in months, Sophia cried so hard she could barely breathe, because even in a note written years ago, even in a message never intended to be found, Ethan's first instinct had been to comfort her, to encourage her, to love her. The realization left her feeling both warm and devastated. Because she had spent years searching for extraordinary love, only to discover that she had already possessed it and thrown it away. That night, sitting alone beside the Christmas tree, Sophia finally admitted something to herself. Finding Ethan wasn't enough anymore. Seeing him wasn't enough. Apologizing wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to erase what she had done. Some wounds couldn't be undone. Some mistakes couldn't be fixed. Some losses became permanent. For the first time since beginning her search, fear entered her heart, a terrifying fear, the fear that she might actually find Ethan one day, only to discover that he no longer wanted anything to do with her, only to discover that he had truly moved on, only to discover that she had become nothing more than a memory, just as he had once become a memory to her. And somehow, that possibility hurt more than all the others combined. Chapter 13. 9 months. That was how long it took. 9 months of searching, 9 months of unanswered calls, 9 months of dead ends, 9 months of waking up every morning with hope and going to sleep with disappointment. By then, Sophia had almost stopped believing she would ever find him, almost. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. She was sitting in her office reviewing documents when her assistant entered. "Miss Bennet." Sophia looked up. "Yes?" Someone from the Henderson Group called. Sophia frowned. The Henderson Group was one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. Over the past few months, they had become a major force in the business world. Everyone was talking about them. Everyone wanted to work with them. Everyone wanted their attention. "What about them?" Her assistant hesitated. "Interested in a partnership." Normally, Sophia would have been pleased. Instead, she simply nodded. "Schedule a meeting." She had become indifferent to success, because every achievement felt hollow now. Every victory felt incomplete. 3 days later, Sophia arrived at the Henderson Group headquarters. The building was impressive, modern, elegant, powerful, a symbol of success. As she entered the lobby, she noticed employees moving efficiently. Everyone looked busy, focused, motivated. The atmosphere felt strangely familiar. It reminded her of Ethan, organized, quietly competent, reliable. The thought made her chest ache. As always, the receptionist smiled. "Executive meeting will begin shortly." Sophia nodded, and followed an assistant toward the conference room. Her mind remained elsewhere, as usual, thinking about Ethan, wondering where he was, wondering if he was happy, wondering if he ever thought about her anymore. The conference room doors opened. Sophia stepped inside, then froze, completely froze. Her heart stopped. The world disappeared. Every sound vanished. Every thought vanished. Everything vanished. Because standing at the far end of the room was Ethan. For several seconds she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. The man she had searched for across 9 months stood only a few feet away, and yet he looked different, very different, not physically. Ethan was still handsome, still familiar, still Ethan, but something fundamental had changed, something deeper. His shoulders were straighter, his posture more confident, his expression calmer. His eyes no longer carried sadness, no longer carried longing, no longer carried heartbreak. They carried peace. And somehow, that hurt more than anything. Ethan looked up from a document. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, Sophia saw surprise, then it disappeared completely, replaced by calm professionalism. "Miss Bennet." His voice was steady, polite, formal, as though they were strangers. Sophia felt her throat tighten. "Ethan." The name escaped before she could stop it. Several executives exchanged confused glances. They clearly didn't understand the history between them. Didn't understand that the woman standing there had once been his entire world. Ethan simply nodded. "Take a seat." Nothing more, no anger, no bitterness, no emotion, and somehow that terrified Sophia. Because hatred would have meant he still cared, this calmness felt worse. The meeting began. Sophia barely heard a word. Her entire attention remained fixed on Ethan, watching him, studying him, trying desperately to understand. He was leading the meeting, confidently, effortlessly. People listened when he spoke, respected him, admired him, trusted him. The quiet man who once spent his evenings waiting for her had become someone else entirely, someone stronger, someone independent, someone who no longer revolved around her. And Sophia realized something painful. While she had spent months trapped in the past, Ethan had built a future. The realization felt like losing him all over again. When the meeting finally ended, everyone began leaving, one by one, until only Sophia and Ethan remained. Silence felt overwhelming. For months she had imagined this moment, rehearsed conversations, prepared apologies, prepared explanations, prepared everything. Yet now that he stood before her, she couldn't find the words. Ethan closed a file, then looked at her calmly, patiently, waiting. "How have you been?" The question sounded absurd, pathetic, small, yet it was all she could manage. Ethan smiled politely, a professional smile, not the warm smile she remembered. "Good." One word, just one word, yet it shattered her. Because she believed him, he really was good, not pretending, not surviving, good. Sophia lowered her eyes, tears threatened to appear. "I searched for you." Ethan remained silent. For months, her voice trembled. "I couldn't find you." Finally, he spoke. "I know." Sophia looked up in surprise. Ethan nodded slightly. "A few people told me." Hope immediately sparked inside her chest, a tiny spark, dangerous, fragile. "If you knew." Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you contact me?" The question lingered between them. Ethan looked out the window, toward the city skyline, toward the life he had built, toward the future he had created. When he finally answered, his voice was quiet but firm, because there was nothing left to say. The words hit harder than any accusation, harder than any insult, harder than any anger. Sophia felt tears fill her eyes. "No, Ethan." But he gently interrupted, not rudely, not cruelly, simply firmly. "Sophia." The way he said her name felt different now, detached, gentle, distant. I spent a long time hoping you would choose us. Her heart broke because she remembered those exact words from his letter. A very long time. His eyes remained calm. Eventually I accepted that you wouldn't. Tears finally fell, and when I left, Ethan continued softly, I had to learn how to live without you. Sophia couldn't stop crying now, because standing before her wasn't the man she left behind. That man had died months ago, destroyed by heartbreak, destroyed by disappointment, destroyed by love. The man standing before her now was someone new, someone healed, someone stronger, someone who had survived losing everything. And for the first time, Sophia understood something terrifying. The biggest obstacle between them wasn't Lucas, wasn't the divorce, wasn't even her betrayal, it was time. Because while she had spent months learning how much she loved Ethan, Ethan had spent those same months learning how to stop loving her and looking into his calm eyes for the first time. She wasn't sure which journey had been more painful. Chapter 14. After Ethan's words, silence filled the conference room, a silence so heavy that Sophia could barely breathe. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continued moving. Cars filled the streets, people hurried to meetings. Life continued as normal, yet Sophia felt as though her entire world had stopped, because for the first time since finding Ethan, she truly understood. He wasn't hiding from her anymore. He wasn't running. He wasn't afraid to see her. The reason he never contacted her was much simpler, much more painful. He no longer needed to. The realization terrified her. Because throughout the past 9 months, a small part of her had secretly believed something, that Ethan still loved her, that beneath all the distance and silence the feelings remained, that if she found him, explained everything, and apologized enough, maybe they could start over, maybe there was still hope. Now that hope was beginning to crumble. Ethan. Her voice shook. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. He remained silent, listening patiently, the same way he always had. I know I hurt you. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I know I betrayed you. The words became harder to say, because speaking them aloud made them real, made them impossible to hide from. I was selfish. Another tear fell. I thought I understood what love was. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. But I didn't. Ethan stood quietly. His expression remained calm, not cold, not cruel, simply calm. That calmness made everything worse, because she remembered another version of him, a version whose eyes filled with emotion whenever he looked at her, a version who would have rushed across the world if she cried, a version who loved her so much that it sometimes felt impossible. That version was gone. Sophia wiped her tears, then continued, because if she didn't say everything now, she might never get another chance. When Lucas came back, she lowered her head. I thought I was reconnecting with my past. A painful smile appeared. But all I was doing was destroying my future. Her voice cracked. I kept chasing a memory. She looked directly at Ethan. And while I was doing that, fresh tears fell. I stopped seeing the person standing right beside me. The first time, emotion flickered in Ethan's eyes just for a second, then disappeared. Sophia continued speaking. Months of regret poured out of her, everything she had carried alone, everything she wished she had said sooner. I found your letters. I found your notebook. I talked to my father. I talked to your coworkers. Her shoulders trembled. Do you know what hurts the most? Ethan didn't answer. I didn't lose you because you stopped loving me. Her voice broke completely. Lost you because I failed to appreciate your love. Room became silent again for a moment. Ethan closed his eyes, a brief moment, a painful moment, because hearing those words stirred old memories, old wounds, old feelings he had spent months healing. When he opened his eyes again, they were calm once more. I know, simple words, nothing more, yet they carried years of sadness. Sophia felt her heart shatter because even now, even after everything, he understood her. That had always been Ethan's greatest gift, understanding. She took a step forward, then another. Love you. Confession escaped her lips, raw, honest, desperate. For months she had wanted to say those words, needed to say them. Love you, Ethan. The room became completely still. Years ago, those words would have made Ethan happier than anything else in the world. Years ago, hearing her say them would have been enough. Years ago, he would have forgiven everything. But years ago no longer existed. Ethan looked at her quietly. His expression softened, not with love, with sadness, and that frightened Sophia more than anger ever could. I know. Again, the same answer, the same devastating answer. Sophia stared at him, confused, heartbroken. Then why? Her voice trembled. Why are you looking at me like this? Ethan was silent for several seconds, as though carefully choosing his words. Finally he spoke. Because I believe you. Sophia froze. I believe you love me. His voice remained gentle. I believe you regret everything. Hope inside her chest immediately surged, but then he continued. And that's what makes this so painful. The hope shattered. Ethan looked away briefly toward the skyline, toward the horizon. There was a time when I needed those words. His voice remained calm. Yet there was sadness beneath it, deep sadness. A time when I would have given anything to hear them. Sophia felt her knees weaken. I waited, he smiled sadly. A very long time. Every word felt like a knife. I waited on anniversaries. I waited through canceled dinners. I waited through lonely nights. I waited while watching you choose someone else. Tears filled Ethan's eyes for the first time, not many, just enough. And eventually, his voice became quieter. I stopped waiting. Sophia covered her mouth. A sob escaped, because she finally understood, truly understood. Ethan hadn't left because he stopped loving her overnight. He left because he had loved her for too long, too deeply, too completely, without receiving the same love in return, and somewhere during that suffering, his heart had finally let go. Ethan. She moved closer, desperately. Please. The single word carried all her regret, all her guilt, all her longing. Give me another chance. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Ethan smiled. A gentle smile, a heartbreaking smile, the same smile he had worn when signing away the apartment, the same smile he had worn while saying goodbye, the smile of a man who had finally made peace with his pain. Sophia, her heart raced. I don't hate you. Tears streamed down her face. Never hated you. His voice remained kind. And I genuinely hope you're happy. Tears wouldn't stop, because she already knew what was coming. She knew, yet she still wasn't ready. Ethan looked directly into her eyes. Love I had for you. A small pause, a painful pause, is gone. The words destroyed her, not because they were cruel, not because they were angry, but because they were honest, completely honest. The room blurred through her tears. For years she had taken his love for granted, believed it would always exist, believed it could survive anything, believed it belonged to her forever. Now she finally understood something devastating. Love wasn't indestructible. Even Ethan's love wasn't indestructible. And she had broken it, not in a single moment, but over hundreds of moments, hundreds of choices, hundreds of disappointments, until there was nothing left to save. Sophia stood there crying, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to change the past. And for the first time since finding Ethan, she accepted the truth. She had finally returned to the man who loved her, only to discover she was too late. Chapter 15. The Final Goodbye. The first snow of the year began falling as Sophia left Ethan's office. White flakes drifted slowly from the sky. People hurried along sidewalks. Cars moved through crowded streets. The world continued exactly as it had before. Yet Sophia felt as though she had stepped into a different reality. A reality where Ethan no longer belonged to her. A reality she had created with her own hands. For several days after their conversation, she barely functioned. Work became meaningless, food lost its taste, sleep became impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Ethan's voice. Love I had for you is gone. Angry, not bitter, simply honest. That honesty hurt more than any accusation ever could. For years, Sophia had imagined countless endings to her marriage, arguments, screaming, resentment, hatred. She had never imagined this. She had never imagined Ethan would leave her with kindness, because kindness left no one to blame except herself. A week later, Sophia received an email, short, professional, simple. The Henderson Group was hosting a charity gala. As a business partner, she was invited. At the bottom of the invitation was Ethan's name. For several minutes she stared at the screen, then made a decision. She would go, not to change his mind, not to beg, not anymore. She had already received her answer, but something inside her needed closure. One final conversation, one final goodbye. The gala was held in one of the city's most prestigious hotels. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Elegant music drifted through the air. Guests filled the room. Laughter echoed everywhere. Yet Sophia noticed only one person, Ethan. He stood among investors and executives, confident, respected, successful. People naturally gravitated toward him, listening when he spoke, smiling when he laughed, admiring the man he had become. Sophia watched from a distance. And for the first time she felt something unexpected, pride, not because he belonged to her, because he deserved this, every bit of it. After everything he endured, after everything he survived, he deserved happiness. As the evening progressed, Ethan eventually noticed her. Their eyes met across the room, neither looked away, neither smiled immediately. Then Ethan offered a small nod, a polite acknowledgement, nothing more. Hours later the crowd began thinning. Guests gradually departed. The ballroom became quieter. And finally, Sophia found herself standing beside Ethan on an outdoor terrace overlooking the city. Snow drifted gently around them. The skyline glowed in the distance. For a while neither spoke, then Sophia broke the silence. "Do you remember our first apartment?" A faint smile appeared on Ethan's face. "Tiny one," she laughed softly through her sadness. "The one with the leaking ceiling. You made me put buckets everywhere. You complained the entire weekend. You laughed the entire weekend." A brief moment they shared a memory, a beautiful one, untouched by betrayal, untouched by regret. A reminder that not everything between them had been painful. "I was happy then," Sophia whispered. Ethan looked at the city lights. "So was I." The answer nearly brought tears to her eyes because it was true. There had been happiness once, real happiness, before mistakes, before Lucas, before everything fell apart. Sophia lowered her gaze. "I wish I could go back." Ethan was silent for several seconds, then shook his head gently. "So do a lot of people." The words carried no judgment, only wisdom. Another silence followed, a peaceful silence, different from before, less painful, more accepting. Finally, Sophia turned toward him, her eyes glistened. "I don't think I'll ever stop being sorry." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long time there was no distance in his gaze, only understanding. "You don't have to spend your whole life punishing yourself." Kindness in his voice almost broke her. Again, even now, even after everything, Ethan was still trying to ease her pain. A tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. "How can you still be kind to me?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because hating you won't change anything." Answer was so perfectly Ethan that it hurt. For a moment, Sophia simply stood there, watching him, memorizing him, his face, his voice, his smile. The small details she had once taken for granted, the details she would now carry forever. Then she asked the question she feared most. "Are you happy?" Ethan looked toward the falling snow. A genuine smile appeared, not forced, not polite, real. "Yes." The single word pierced her heart, yet strangely, it also brought peace, because she had wanted him to be happy long before she wanted him back, and now he was. Sophia smiled through her tears. "I'm glad." The first time she truly meant it. Ethan nodded. The snow continued falling, soft, quiet, beautiful. Then Sophia took a deep breath. The deepest breath she had taken in months. "I think this is goodbye." The words trembled, but they were sincere. Ethan looked at her for several seconds, then nodded. "I think so too." No dramatic confession followed, no sudden reconciliation, no miracle, because life wasn't always like that. Sometimes love returned too late. Sometimes lessons arrived after the opportunity was gone. Sometimes people lost the things they valued most. Sophia stepped forward, then gently hugged him, one final time. Ethan hesitated only briefly before returning the embrace. Not as a husband, not as a lover, just as someone who had once shared 7 years of his life with her. When they separated, both were smiling sadly. "Take care of yourself, Sophia." Her eyes filled with tears again. "To Ethan." Then he turned and walked away. Sophia watched him go past the terrace doors, through the ballroom, into the crowd, until she could no longer see him. Years ago she had watched Lucas leave, and spent years mourning that loss. Tonight she watched Ethan leave, and understood what real loss truly felt like. Because Lucas had been a dream, Ethan had been home. The snow continued falling as Sophia stood alone beneath the winter sky, not chasing him, not calling after him, not begging him to stay. For the first time she respected his choice. Just as she should have respected his love. Far away, Ethan stepped into a waiting car. He glanced once at the hotel, then looked forward, toward tomorrow, toward a future he had built himself, toward a life that finally belonged to him. And somewhere in the city, a woman sat alone reading an old letter for the 100th time, not because she expected him to return, but because those words reminded her of a truth she would never forget. The greatest punishment had never been losing Lucas. The greatest punishment had never been the divorce. The greatest punishment was realizing too late that she had once been loved completely, and had let that love slip through her fingers. Epilogue 2 years later, Ethan was happier than he had ever imagined. The pain had faded, the scars remained, but they no longer hurt. He had learned that endings were not the same thing as failures. Some stories ended so that better chapters could begin. As for Sophia, she continued living, continued working, continued moving forward. But every winter when the first snow began to fall, she would open Ethan's final letter and sit quietly by the window, remembering, learning, growing. Not every love story ends with two people together. Some love stories end with a lesson. And theirs was simple. Love should be valued while it is being given. Because once a heart finally lets go, even the deepest regret may not be enough to bring it back.